Story 1. We should. I once saw Gordon Ramsay prepare lobster, and he stabbed it in the brain just before boiling to ensure it was dead first. If that is good enough for his 5 Michelin stars, then it is good enough for me. Story 2. I split my Dungeness crabs in half and clean them before cooking. This results in a better taste and is more humane. I believe the same would apply to lobsters. Story 3. I went to dinner at someone's house once, and live Dungeness crabs were on the menu. I will never forget the sound of them skittering around in the steam pot as they died. Truly made me lose my appetite. It is not necessary to steam or boil them alive. Story 4. I grew up enjoying fresh Atlantic lobster at the table many times, and I always felt that tossing a lobster into boiling water was cruel. It seems really unnecessary. Story 5. I heard that ethics concerning invertebrates are not as specific or may not be protected by safe animal testing research policies. I think it's because they do not have spines or conventional nervous systems to feel pain. Story 6. There is ongoing debate among scientists about whether lobsters experience pain. While they possess a relatively primitive nervous system, they do exhibit certain behaviors that suggest a pain response. Story 7. I'm all for the sentiment, but how exactly do they expect this to be enforceable? Kitchen patrols? Lobster autopsies? Laws like this make me feel governments are just trying to score brownie points for hollow promises. Story 8. I believe more humane methods of killing should be explored for all types of seafood. Japanese fishers reportedly kill the tuna they are catching for sushi quickly by stabbing it in the brain, rather than allowing it to die from suffocation, which is believed to be much better for the quality of the meat as well. Story 9. I worked in a lobster restaurant for years. The alternative to boiling is to cut and break their body in half and remove their stomach and digestive tract. This method does not effectively kill them. They still move and react. Usually, they die in the oven. Lobsters do not have a single central brain that can be disconnected. They have a series of ganglia that control different parts of the body. To shut down all of them simultaneously to avoid pain, you need to target all at once. Boiling is a relatively quick way to achieve this. There are no truly painless options. Story 10. As a former culinary student, it is better to flip them onto their backs and make a vertical cut along the length of the body. This prevents the body from tensing up in the boiling water, which creates tougher meat. Story 11. We won't ban goldfish bowls and betta vases being sold as acceptable tanks to keep living things. Why would we care about something we are going to harm? Story 12. Switzerland is truly ahead of the game. They always have the best of everything. Should I consider moving to Switzerland? I'm not even American. I live in Canada. But still. Story 13. I am a meat eater, and the one thing I dislike about eating meat is the way animals are treated prior to being killed. I really hope this catches on around the world. If you feel bad for lobsters, consider the situation with horseshoe crab blood farms. The existence of these farms makes me ashamed to be human. Story 14. As an American, I feel like our government would push for the right to boil people before they fight against boiling lobsters. Story 15. I have heard that they take the lobster and put them in a freezer until they freeze to death and then boil them. Story 16. There would be an unimaginable number of people who would vote to boil anyone they disagree with alive. Do you think they care about lobsters? Story 17. Do you think the rest of the world will catch on? No. Why or why not? We banned plastic straws, but not plastic lids or cups. We also cannot even agree on helping our fellow humans in our own cities, so I do not see how people would agree or care enough to address the issue. Story 18. No, because America cannot treat its citizens correctly. There is no way any of the individuals who could actually make a difference would vote in favor of something so unprofitable. Story 19. The United States will not make it illegal to declaw cats. However, some states and cities have banned the practice. Story 20. Swiss animal welfare laws are exemplary. Their regulations regarding equine welfare are outstanding, and other countries should strive to implement similar standards globally. Story 21. I think this is great. I wouldn't want to be boiled alive. I don't believe anyone enjoys that sensation, whether small or large. Story 22. Do you believe that the creatures that eat humans care about our feelings? Many predators consume their prey while they are still alive, showing no concern for what we feel. If we were lobster food, they would not compassionately snip our brains. So, stop caring and remember that you are the product of millions of years of evolution. You are embarrassing the species and the process. Story 23. I don't think people can only empathize with and show love for different species that can socialize with us or fulfill an emotional need, such as the animals we consider pets. We should also recognize how we treat livestock, which has been proven to possess sentience. Therefore, I do not believe people care enough about the ocean cockroach. Story 24. If invertebrates such as lobsters, insects, and cockroaches felt pain, consider the suffering you have caused them. This includes ant traps, insecticides on your lawn, bug zappers, and swatting mosquitoes. Additionally, pesticides are used on crops, resorts, parks, and golf courses. Lobsters have 15 nerve clusters throughout their bodies. Stabbing one behind the eyes only severs one cluster. However, these are just nerve clusters and not brains. If you truly care about animal suffering, focus on the large mammals in factory farms, zoos, and aquariums. Story 25. What about the horrors in the butchery, where animals witness the suffering of other animals being slaughtered and spend their entire lives in small cages, never seeing sunlight? Story 26. I love to eat lobster. It was my first time cooking them. I boil them alive. Since then, I decided to stab them between the eyes before cooking. Story 27. The size of a lobster's brain is so small that you are likely to miss it with a knife without killing it. You merely stab it and then put it in a boiling pot of water alive to finish it. Not sure it's any better. Story 28. We have learned a lot about animals and how they feel and perceive. Many people justify catch and release fishing by claiming that it does not hurt the fish because they lack nerves. In summary, humans often tell themselves falsehoods to avoid acknowledging the pain they cause. Understanding the suffering inflicted on animals is crucial. Some individuals remain indifferent and continue to kill shellfish by boiling them alive, while others recognize the implications of their actions and choose to change. We must depend on those willing to learn and improve. If we reach a point where regulations are established based on what we have learned, it will be a positive development. Story 29. It's just food. Who is going to stop people from throwing a live lobster into boiling water? Get over yourself. Story 30. It seems wrong to boil an animal while it is unconscious. I am not against eating meat or animal products, but we should be advanced enough to treat every animal as humanely as possible. Story 31. Nova Scotia lobster producer Clearwater has shut down 2 plants because live lobster sales are declining and geopolitical pressures make it too risky. Story 32. Honestly, I think we have a better chance with cultured meat and fish. Yes, there may be nicer ways to kill, but it is still a kill. Farmed animals suffer much more than lobsters in terms of how they are treated. Story 33. The whistling shells freak me out enough, but how do you knock out a lobster? I haven't had chloroform in the kitchen in years. Story 34. We should, but it is going to take a while for some people to accept. Granted, the reason we boil shellfish alive is because their tendency causes the meat to seize up within minutes of death. Lobster is notoriously difficult to ship for longer than a couple of days. Story 35. Honestly, they won't. Seafood has become so mainstream in many countries that it's impossible. There will always be countries where boiling intelligent life alive is considered normal and legal. However, I believe it should be made illegal. Story 36. I appreciate the law, but how will it be enforced? Will a police officer be sent every time someone buys a lobster? Story 37. The USDA's Farm Animal Welfare Research Lab, with only one scientist remaining, was dismantled by Trump. Story 38. Cannot even get people to care about their neighbors or family members. I do not think lobsters have any chance. Story 39. Most life experiences pain. That smell of cut grass is a chemical signal warning other plants of predatory herbivores. Story 40. How would they enforce that? Or is this one of those situations where they know they cannot actually enforce it, but it exists for the principle. Story 41. It is frustrating, so I hope not. However, considering the average intelligence of people in this country, I fully expect it. Story 42. I worked in a restaurant back in 1975, and they had lobster night. You could have it broiled, where the broiler would put the lobster on a cutting board and then use a cleaver to split it in half. The lobster would then go on a metal plate and directly into a really hot broiler. For boiling, the lobster went headfirst into a pot of boiling water. I think the former method was more humane because it was faster, while boiling seems a bit slower. Story 43. So they just suffocate them by taking them out of the water for a while. Sam. Joey, is he dead yet? Joey. I don't know, but he's not moving. He might have passed out. Sam. Good enough, plop. Story 44. No, it probably won't catch on. I don't see people viewing lobsters as anything other than a mindless creature whose only use is food. Unless you're Homer Simpson. Rest in peace, Pinchy. Story 45. I heard that if you put them in the fridge for 30 minutes beforehand, it knocks them out. I have no idea if this is actually the case. Story 46. I don't know if it should be illegal, but it definitely seems wrong to me and no one should ever do it. Story 47. The rest of the world? Do you know that many places don't have enough drinking water, enough food, housing that isn't substandard, access to basic health care? I think this is a good law. However, this is a first world problem, and the majority of the rest of the world will not recognize it. Story 48. The beach restaurant where I used to work had cooks who always chopped the lobster across the head before cooking it. They also stored them in the walk-in cooler, so they were basically dormant. Story 49. Last time I checked, there are no lobsters native to Switzerland. They can enjoy cheese instead. Story 50. Many chefs already use a technique with a knife that poses risks just before they begin working. This practice has been followed by responsible individuals, and the necessity for legislation around it is unreasonable. Story 51. The United States will outlaw existing methods of making money through exploitation that causes direct, provable harm to living beings when you pry them from its cold, dead hands. They have done it before and they will do it again. Story 52. I used to work for a seafood distributor that sold live mud crabs. Any crabs not sold after a day or two would be boiled because they were easier to store and sell that way. We had a questionable employee whose job it was to cook the crabs. This individual clearly did not care about the well-being of his colleagues or even himself, and he was working in a factory where workplace safety was more of a concept than a rule. However, even he refused to cook them live. All the crabs received a screwdriver to the face before being boiled, and he warned others that if they ever considered cooking them live, they would face the same consequence. Story 53. Oh, I like this. This is a nice fact. I have always felt bad for the lobsters. I do not think the world will catch on, though. It is not on their radar. Story 54. How would they ever know if you boiled them or not? It seems like a foolish thing to enforce because, for the most part, it is unenforceable. Story 55. Unfortunately, people have a tough time treating others with respect and dignity. I'm sure it will catch on in some places, but I don't see that happening in the southern United States. Story 56. Most of the world cannot agree that people who look different from them feel pain, let alone a lobster. Story 57. I hope so. It is easy to ensure a quick death instead of causing prolonged suffering. There is no reason not to do it. Story 58. I live in a lobster fishing area in Nova Scotia. We are not going to stop boiling our lobsters. Story 59. People do not care. We come up with small gestures like this to feel better about ourselves and to congratulate ourselves, claiming, "See, we are good people. We care about the issues we are unnecessarily harming for enjoyment." Good, empathetic, moral individuals do not exploit or kill and eat animals or use products made from their bodies when it is not necessary. Whether you treat the animal kindly or poorly before ending its life makes no difference to the victim in the end. Either way, they die unnecessarily. For what? Brief sensory pleasure. It is unethical. Let the negative feedback from those who are hypocritical and experience significant cognitive dissonance begin. Story 60. I don't think it will ever become law in the United States, at least. It's common sense that they should be euthanized first to avoid suffering, but it's impossible to enforce. Humans will do what is easier. Story 61. I used to work at Giant in the seafood department. I am still horrified by the screams when I had to place them in the oven. I refused to work in the seafood department after that. Story 62. I remember hearing something about that. I'm pretty sure Canada passed a similar law a few years ago. Story 63. California has similar rules, having had them for at least a decade. If you want a live lobster from the fishmonger, you must kill it yourself. They will not do it for you. Story 64. Whole Foods stopped selling lobster many years ago for this reason. If I recall correctly, no one knows if they actually feel pain, but they couldn't rule it out. In the biology lab, they used to stick a needle in the frog's brain before dissection. Perhaps they should consider doing that. I do not eat shellfish, which are often referred to as giant bugs that consume the polluted scum at the bottom of our waterways. Story 65. I grew up loving fishing. It was part of my core identity. One day in my late 30s, I thought, that must be difficult for the fish. I stopped fishing. Now, I practice catch and release and use crimped barbs. We can do better. Story 66. No, because nobody actually cares. If they did, they wouldn't eat lobster. I don't eat lobster, but I also don't care. Story 67. Having spent 10 years in New England, my husband would often use a knife to quickly execute the task between the abdomen and tail. We felt better knowing it was done swiftly. Story 68. I hope the rest of the world catches on because it is cruel. There are ways to humanely kill lobsters that do not involve boiling them alive. Why wouldn't you want to humanely kill something unless you are unwell? Story 69. It's not important. No one with common sense cares either way. We're talking about ocean creatures. Do it or not, it's irrelevant. Story 70. Whether it is a law or not, immoral people will still engage in such behavior. Eating animals is not moral unless it is for survival. Story 71. America will not do this on a large scale for a very long time. Nobody cares about anything. Maybe it will catch on in later generations if lobsters become common and affordable in the future. Current older generations are too set in their ways, do not care, or cannot think for themselves. Story 72. A portion of Trump voters knew he raped a woman, knew he very likely raped underage girls, knew he was a fraud, knew he hated black people, and knew he considered anyone not extremely wealthy as worthless. Despite knowing all this, they looked their less wealthy black daughter in the eye and voted for him. Lobsters are the least of my worries these days. Story 73. I do not think lobsters feel pain. They do not have a cortex, and the evidence to support this is circumstantial. Story 74. Lobsters aren't that great, in my opinion. I much prefer shrimp meat. Lobster bisque is good, though, but crawfish bisque is just as good. That's where the real dilemma lies. It's not much of an inconvenience to kill a couple of lobsters before boiling them, but to kill 100 or more tiny crawfish before boiling them becomes a race against time. You will definitely get pinched a lot if you try to do it that way. Story 75. Only liberals. The first politician to stand up and propose dividing the country into two different nations will likely receive more support than people expect. Story 76. So they are denying themselves fresh seafood? Keep in mind that the country also allows the purchase of hard drugs in public parks. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.